Hi everyone, and welcome to my podcast. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about alcohol and the role it plays in the lives of our cherished first responders. I'm not going to bore you guys with everything you already know about alcohol. We all know how it works, how it makes us feel, why we use it. But I think in the role of the first responders, it's different, and it's more predictable. It's obviously therefore preventable. But I think if I can get the word out to people, what is it like to be a first responder, why they are in need of a coping mechanism, and instead of just telling them, stop drinking, it's not good for you. If we can, kind of with my theme in my first podcast, like instead of being reactive in treating the trauma, why can't we be proactive in looking at how did this get started? How did we set these people up to suffer this in the first place? So that's what I want to talk about. I have a few notes here. I'm just going to glance at my laptop now and then. But for the most part, I'm just going to ramble on like I always do. So going back to the first responder, they see their universe around them and their role in it a little different than the rest of us. So even for the normal person who has a hard day, looks forward to that beer at home, wants to relax, it's not the same as our first responders are going through. So I'm going to go through that a little bit with you guys to give you a better understanding. So first of all, I just want to start out by saying I am not a rehab therapist. I don't think drugs and alcohol are necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I was surprised to learn in psychopharmacology in grad school that we have found through research, people can use all sorts of mood-altering substances without any negative consequences, including cocaine and heroin, which was not what we learned back in the 80s and 90s in those public service announcements about the egg and the frying pan and this is your brain on drugs and all that stuff. So just so you know, I'm not some Pollyanna-ish therapist who thinks all drugs are bad and no one should drink. I'm definitely not that kind of therapist. So, we've been using substances and alcohol for about 9,000 years that we have evidence for. So as a human being, our species goes way back with substances and altering our moods. So no judgment from me, just so you know, going in. I totally get it and have no reason to tell people not to use substances for relaxation or socialization. But the one thing that I am worried about is isolation. In fact, unfortunately, you're going to hear me talk about that a few times here today, that it's the isolation from family, community, and even self that gets people in trouble. And that's what kills, if you ask me, is the isolation. So, and that's why I'm making this video. I want people to know you don't have to isolate. You can reach out to someone like me online with 100% confidentiality. And I'm more than happy to take a crisis call in the middle of the night or sit and talk with you on a Zoom call or meet you out in the field, wherever you are. If you're having a hard time, you don't have to go through this alone. And I can, like I said, I can help you in confidence. So very discreet, and because I also realize that plays a huge role in how you end up isolating. And it's like a vicious cycle where the more you try to cope with alcohol, the less you want people to know you're drinking. So the more you're going to cope with alcohol, and then you just go down this spiral, terrible, into a bad place. So Again, it's the isolation that worries me more than the drinking itself. I think with first responders too, taking on the identity of a protector, almost of a hero, their expectations of the community, we expect them to be almost like their uniform is like a shield that protects them, makes them strong, invincible. But it's a uniform. It unifies them as a team. It doesn't protect them from trauma. It doesn't protect them from seeing terrible things. So there's that again, there's that identity of being a protector. So when they're hurting, do they want us to know? Are they going to come to somebody and say, hey, I'm really hurting, I need help? Probably not. They're probably going to say, nope, I got to be strong, I got to suck it up, I don't want to look like a wimp, or, I'm not going to a counselor, I'm not a pussy. I heard that more than once. So I have to, hopefully by doing these podcasts, get the message out to normalize the idea that you're a human being. And to be honest, I think a lot of first responders go into their careers. I'd love to say you were super courageous, but I actually think you were just more naive in entering a career that's going to expose you to some pretty tough stuff. And also just the cumulative process of seeing people not on their best day, not in the best situation, not looking their best, not behaving their best. I mean, you're seeing people committing crimes after car accidents, they're lying to you, who knows what's going on. But if you see that, if that's who you're dealing with day in and day out, no way that's not going to have an impact on your mental well-being. And then I'll go into a little bit more as we go along here, how the first responder's career becomes sort of, I don't want to say cocooned, but they end up spending all of their time with other first responders, whether on duty or after their shift, because it ends up being, they can't relate to non-responders after a while, and they feel more normal around other responders who all have that dark humor and that appreciation and understanding, the acceptance, the trust. I mean, it all makes sense why they would bond. But what ends up happening is these first responders lose touch with the rest of the world. So they become even more isolated as a group. And that pulling away from the family, the neighbors, their other friends, not doing the things they used to do on the weekends, it sort of makes their life off balance so that they're just with other responders and they're just talking and complaining constantly about the people they're dealing with on their day-to-day duties. So there's nothing to off balance all that negativity, and that becomes all of their life. That becomes their universe, basically, according to their brain, because that's all that's coming in day after day. That's what the world is, and that takes a toll on them. Unfortunately, they're not prepared in the academy for this. I wish they were. I don't know why they're not, to be honest. I feel like that's just such a fucking no-brainer. So I feel like you should be sent into your daily duties. You've got your vest, right, to protect you from bullets. You have your gun, your taser, you got your radio, stun gun, whatever, your baton. But what do you have to protect your brain, your mind? Nothing, unless you get some kind of training, some psych armor type emotional agility training, which is what I'm trying to do, to create and to normalize and to get out there for everybody. This is a huge missing component in our first responders' lives. And I think that plays a huge role in that statistic about them being twice as likely to die of suicide than in the line of duty. I don't know how you can separate the two. They're just totally connected. So let's just talk about drinking in general. A lot of us were exposed to drinking high school, junior high, and it was a fun way to go out with friends and have a good time and relax and be sociable. Maybe lower our inhibitions a little bit, which could be good or bad, depending what you're up to. But why do first responders drink? So sometimes people drink as a way of coping to escape feelings of guilt. They might even need, like, lowering the inhibitions might be their way of giving themselves permission to relax, because maybe they don't feel they deserve it. In fact, when I talk with the responders face to face about self-care, that does come up, that they feel they don't deserve that, which is that's horrible. That they would feel that way, because they need it. They need it. Like I've said so many times before, you take care of your vehicle, why wouldn't you take care of yourself? You need to take care of yourself so you'll last longer. So in the old days, our first responders would get together after their shifts, and at least in law enforcement, they would have what they called choir practice, which was basically getting together after their shift, going to the bar, having a few drinks, kind of debriefing the day, bonding with each other, supporting each other, feeling heard, helping them cope day to day. That's what they did. So they called that choir practice. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing, at least in the small PD that I was working with, there aren't a lot of officers on duty at any given time. In fact, I spoke with one of them who also volunteers at the fire department, who said, when we go on calls at the fire department, we go as a group. We deal with whatever is going on the call as a group, and then we come back to the station as a group and we can debrief. So we feel kind of like, okay, we got through that together, and I don't have to take this home with me. I feel like I talked about it. I'm good to go. But he said, when I'm at the police station, where maybe due to budget cuts, maybe due to just having a small population, unfortunately, our law enforcement are often one officer per shift. So he was explaining to me how he goes out on calls by himself, and then he has to come back to the station by himself. And unless he's going to hash it out with the dispatch, person who happens to be there, or maybe an officer from another agency happens to stop by for a little visit, who is he going to talk to about that? And unfortunately, our responders don't always want to talk about their stuff at work when they get home. They either don't feel like talking about it, maybe they're tired, they're ready to relax and unwind, or maybe they don't want their loved ones to know what happened that day because they don't want them to worry, or they don't want them to put pressure on them to change their career, because maybe if the loved ones knew how complicated and how dangerous their jobs were, they would pressure them to quit their jobs as responders. So there are a lot of reasons why responders don't open up and have that security of going home and, purging all their feelings after each shift with their loved ones. A lot of them just don't do that. And that in itself can affect the relationship, especially if the loved one wants to hear about it. Maybe the loved one's like, why aren't you telling me? What, is there something I should know about? They would see it as a wedge between them. So why are you keeping that from me? Not understanding, maybe the responder's just too tired to talk about it. Or doesn't want that loved one to worry about it. So it becomes an issue at home too. So we know that alcohol has negative effects on our bodies. It can have negative consequences if you drink. But I think what also happens is when you're a responder, you go home after your shift and drink, you're now basically socially isolating because you're too drunk to go anywhere. And you might even be invited to go do something with someone, but in your mind, you're like, no, I need to go home and have a drink. I'm going to go home and sit in my chair, play video games, or just zone out, whatever I need to do to escape. So now, even when you have an opportunity to socialize with people outside of the responder community, you're not going to do it. You might not even spend time with your loved ones because you just need to tune out. You need to escape with your alcohol. And so that can affect your life with your loved ones, your children, and your spouse too. So alcohol is a very common coping mechanism. It starts out, like I was saying, in junior high, maybe senior high, as a social lubricant, kind of, just drinking with your buddies, your friends. But I think as we get older, the role of alcohol in our lives kind of changes a little bit, and especially in the lives of responders, it becomes a very common coping mechanism, but with some pretty serious negative consequences. And it evolves quickly in a downward spiral for reasons I'll explain here. So yeah, it's a coping mechanism, but it's not the best coping mechanism. So there's a quote here I was going to share. It says, "I drink alcohol to down my problems. Unfortunately, my problems are damn good swimmers." So basically it means I drink to escape my problems, but they never go away. My problems are always there. And the bad part is now the drinking itself becomes a problem. So now you have more problems and you're less able to deal with it. We know that alcohol numbs your feelings. It can numb anxiety, depression, shame, all those terrible negative feelings. But the only bad part is it doesn't address them. In fact, research shows it can actually intensify feelings of anxiety and depression because your brain is always looking for that numbness that you have while you're buzzed. So when you don't have it, you're going to have more anxiety. And unfortunately, too, with drugs like alcohol, it takes more and more over time to get that same feeling. So if you're now seeking that buzzed, relaxed feeling, over time you're going to be drinking even more, looking for that. So the other thing it does, aside from helping you escape, is it lowers our inhibitions, which probably is not the best thing for a first responder who has a very important job and a very important role in our community and reputation to uphold for whatever agency they're working for. They have a lot to lose. So lowering your inhibitions is not really the best thing for a first responder. But I think it's important for first responders not to be hard on themselves, which I'm sure a lot of them are, because they're problem solvers. They're problem solvers and they save lives. They take care of other people. So they're going to be hard on themselves when they have a problem that they can't solve. And that forces them to take care of themselves, something they're not really good at doing. And often they say, I feel guilty when I think about self-care. So there's that playing into that too. But I think it's important for them to realize, using alcohol is a very common coping mechanism. And there are other ways that you can learn to cope too. And maybe we can, if you come to see someone like me, we can help you find some more healthy ways to cope. With that, though, if you see a therapist, at least, like me, I can help you unpack what is the underlying reason that you're drinking. What is it that you need to cope with? Is it childhood? Is it, something going on from your relationship with your primary attachment figures, mom, dad, whoever was your caregiver? Is it a trauma that you've experienced on the job as a responder? Is it the stress of on the job, dealing with coworkers, budget cuts, all of the problems you have to deal with on the job, including hypervigilance, which is something I'm probably going to end up talking in every podcast I do, because I feel like it's something that affects all responders and they were not prepared to deal with it, yet it is sort of insidious in how evasive it is in affecting every part of their life. So I'm going to put my little spiel in here right now that with the hypervigilance, you're working long hours, you're trying to stay safe, trying to be always on, alert for danger, but you also might have sort of a natural high, especially in the beginning of your career, of just feeling kind of pumped up. I love my job. I want to make my chief proud of me and the community. I'm going to keep everybody safe. And so you're just kind of like on this high, and it takes a lot of cognitive power to keep that going, especially for a whole shift. And some of it is justified, right? Like I said in podcast 1, it's good to be vigilant, just not hypervigilant. And the difference is, are you in control of it? So if you're hypervigilant on a 12-hour shift, that's a lot of cognitive power coming out, and you're going to have to recoup that. So when you get home, your mind and body are going to crash. Just like people who use ecstasy all weekend and crash Monday morning. It's no different. Your brain can only make so much dopamine each day. And if you're using it during your hypervigilance, you're going to have to recover it. So as soon as you come home, you feel safe, you let your guard down. That's the time your brain's going to go into that recovery mode. Unfortunately, you're going to feel tired and probably a little grumpy, and you're not going to feel like spending a lot of time with the wife and kids. That's when you're going to be in that isolation, escape type mode. Maybe you go disappear into your video games, crack open that IPA. It's the hypervigilance. It's not the wife and kids making you feel bad. It's the hypervigilance at work. And unfortunately, it's you being a good first responder that creates the hypervigilance. So it's not because you're a terrible responder. It's because you're a good responder and you take your job seriously and you want to do a really good job and be aware and be safe and, all of that. So it's unfair that the more you want to be a good responder, the more vulnerable you are to hypervigilance. And it's counterintuitive where when you get home, you feel tired and crabby, you just want to zone out, and you don't want to necessarily go out and do things with friends or loved ones or your kids, but it's actually going out and do things with your loved ones and kids that's going to help you to feel better and get more energy. So that's why I feel like education is so important, because if you think it's the wife and kids making you tired and cranky when you get home, and you rationalize in your mind, I'm not going to spend time with them, I'm just going to go play video games, or I'm going to go watch Netflix, or I'm going to go and have another beer, you're actually just going to make yourself worse. So, and your world's going to keep getting smaller, because again, all you're seeing day to day, the people you're socializing with, interacting with, are either other responders on the job or the people you're arresting or rescuing. And that's not necessarily the most positive exchange in the world, right? Those are probably almost always negative exchanges. So now even when you have an opportunity to have positive personal interactions at home, you don't want it, because now you got to recover from your hypervigilance. So I wish people learned this in the academy before they even started their career, because it's during that honeymoon phase in the beginning of the career that you're most likely to be hypervigilant, because you're beginning your career, you're unsure of what's going on, so you're trying to be very much aware, you're trying to remember what your training was, you want to be safe, you want to do a good job, you want to make everybody proud of you. So it's really in the beginning, I think, that the hypervigilance is probably like everybody's at most risk for that. So it's if you know what it is, then you know what to do about it. If you don't know what it is, you'll just think it's the wife and kids, and then you're just one more ingredient to push you in that downward spiral. Not only you're going to have negative interactions with people on the job, but you're going to have difficult calls too. So, the responders that I spoke with definitely there was a theme across the board of having trouble with calls concerning little kids. No doubt about it. That was everybody's least favorite call to go on. And you're seeing kids getting hurt, you're seeing kids dying. That's some pretty hard stuff to deal with, especially if you're a first responder. You're the first one on the scene. You're responsible for saving whoever's there, or putting things into, putting events into action that would lead to them surviving, making sure the EMS comes, holding traffic back, whatever you have to do. That's a lot of responsibility. So if the little kid doesn't make it, or little kid is, badly injured, that's going to be hard to take. It's going to be hard to cope with that, especially if you have one call after another over time, which is what we call cumulative trauma. So even if you didn't have one call, like an acute situation that really traumatizes you, over time it accumulates. So your brain keeps a record of all that stuff. Unfortunately, what we know about the neuroscience of PTSD, when you're in that hypervigilant state, it's almost like a fight or flight threat response. Your cortex can shut down. Your memories being encoded at that time don't get that, the narrative language encoding with it. So now your brain is going to remember those negative emotions, the panic, the fear, without the narrative that explains, this is what happened, this is what I did what I was trained to do, now that's in the past, my life is in the present, and I'll be okay. You don't get that narrative, because when the cortex shuts down, language shuts down, those memories are going to be encoded with the emotional response only. That's what leads to PTSD. And that brings me back to why the academies need to do more training in emotional agility. Because if you can keep the cortex running, if you don't go into that threat response and keep your cortex running, then all of your memories will be encoded with the proper language narrative, and you will know that all of those terrible memories are in the rearview mirror. They're not in the windshield. And because you'll have that timestamp with the narrative. So again, this training and counseling, psych armor support for first responders is critical for helping with calls with little kids and that kind of thing. Because it affects how you parent your little kid. If you have little kids, it affects how you parent them too. So it's not a victimless situation where it's just you who becomes traumatized. But if you are traumatized by the calls you're going on, as a parent, you are inadvertently traumatizing your children now. That's called vicarious trauma. You are vicariously traumatized by the person who was traumatized in the accident, and now your children are one step removed, vicariously traumatized by your trauma. So that's why this counseling is so critical, and that's why I'll keep doing these podcasts, to just keep, sending the message home. There are off-duty pressures too that our responders deal with, whether it's working long hours, not being home on holidays or birthdays or wedding anniversaries, those kind of things, especially like in our small community here, where there are not enough people on the payroll to cover all the shifts. So they don't always get the days off that they would like to get off. And that can cause a little bit of a conflict in relationships with loved ones when, I've heard them say things like, this is the first, Christmas in 5 years I'll be spending with the wife and kids. I'm just like, man, that's a sacrifice. I don't think the community realizes what a sacrifice our first responders are making. So that's another reason for my podcast, is to help people really appreciate what people are sacrificing for us to just be able to get out of bed and go on our merry way each day and have everything go smoothly. If you're a responder and you find yourself drinking to cope with responder related stuff, and or it's just having an impact on your job as a responder, Maybe you had some personal stuff that was affecting your job. And then, I mean, it's all related, whether it happened as a kid, maybe you're abandoned, maybe you had grew up in the foster care system, maybe you have issues from childhood too, but it's only going to be exacerbated with this career as a responder. So what we want to do, if you came to me, is let's look at, so the drinking is a symptom. What is the cause? What is underlying? What is going on inside of you that you are trying to escape from? What is the pain coming? Where is it coming from? So that's where we would begin. I mean, first, obviously, we build rapport, and I would help you to trust me and realize it's a safe space, that we're together working through all that stuff as a team. And I'm not going to judge you, and I'm not going to tell anybody what we talk about. And then we will just start peeling off the layers of your life. What's going on in there? Where is the tension in your body, and what are the feelings associated with that, and where does that come from, and how is that affecting you tonight when you come home and you're going to the fridge to pull out that cold drink? And so instead of telling you stop drinking, we're going to go, stop having the symptom. We're going to go to the underlying cause that's pushing you to seek relief. Like, what is it that you're running from? So, once we start unpacking all that stuff, and we're looking to sort of change your way of thinking about your life, like, instead of like, where do you not want to go in your life? Where do you want to go in your life? Like, let's bring some more intentionality into your life, how you're living. Where do you want to go in life? So there's some questions, so let's say you could have your perfect day in your life. What would that look like? Where would you be? Would you be out on a lake somewhere? Would you be, riding a horse? Would you be shopping? Like, if you have a perfect day, where would you like to be? What would you be doing? Who would you be with? Like, who in your life makes you feel good? Who helps you to grow into the person that you want to become? As opposed to like holding you back or pushing you down or making you feel terrible. And so instead of thinking about what you don't like in life, what do you want in life? And just doing that can start new neural pathways in your brain to think, wow, like just thinking about being out on the lake, listening to the geese kind of flying by, little turtles swimming, jumping off the rocks, the butterflies landing on the cattails, the waves kind of rippling, just whatever is your perfect day, think about that. And you probably even feel your body start to relax just thinking about it. You always have that. You always have that ability to go to a good place. And that's something that I could actually teach you, or another therapist could teach you, is instead of escaping the bad thing, maybe you could go to a good, healthy place and let your body relax. Because research shows a relaxed body doesn't let the brain sit in that threat response mode. So it desensitizes the amygdala and it allows the cortex to be more active. So you can actually get rid of negative feelings by relaxing your body. So if I could offer you one thing today, just for watching this video, next time you feel anxious or depressed or sad or whatever is your negative feeling, I would say for you to ask yourself, where is the tension in my body? And just close your eyes, take a few nice, slow, deep breaths, and feel for where is the tension, and release the tension. And once you release that tension, watch how your mind changes. Watch how your feelings change. it's scientific. We know it with brain scans. We know it works. So, and that would be also something that you could work with a therapist to help you find a more healthy way to cope than with alcohol. And I'm not the kind of person, I'm actually a little, like they taught us in grad school that although the 12-step program is effective, it's controversial. Let's put it that way. That people are taught, once an addict, always an addict. Because as a therapist, especially as a Rogerian therapist, how could I look at a person and not think that they have the strength and ability within them to grow through this? So, right or wrong, I don't like the idea once an addict, always an addict, because I believe the addiction is a symptom of the underlying need to escape. So if I can disconnect or diffuse that need to escape, that person could then theoretically outgrow that need to self-medicate. And that's how I approach it. Like I said, right or wrong, I'm just saying. That's how I feel. There is another saying about drinking alcohol. It says people are not addicted to alcohol or drugs. They're addicted to escaping reality. So when you're drinking, you could ask yourself, what am I running from? Why am I escaping? I think if you know why you're escaping, that gives you a lot of information about how to address the issue. I'm guessing even if you did everything right as a first responder, you could still end up in this situation, in this trap of drinking too much or of using alcohol to cope. So I hope you would not be hard on yourself and beat yourself up about it, or feel hopeless, or feel that you can't reach out for help because someone will judge you. For sure, there are a lot of people out there who love you and care about you and don't want anything bad to happen to you. And just as you would risk your life to help other people, there are people like me who would do anything to help you. I feel compelled to do whatever I can and keep doing it until I make a difference. We have way too many responders risking everything, including their relationships, their mental health, their physical health, and in the end, unfortunately, their careers as they crash and burn. And it is unbelievably predictable and preventable. So even if you are a perfect angel, a perfect person, perfect human being, and you go into the academy and you pass all your exams with the best scores ever, and you're the toughest, physically strongest person, and you can, you're like Superman, you do everything right, you could still end up in this situation. Because alcohol is such a calming coping mechanism, and because the expectations put upon you, not only by your training, your employer, the community in general, and the expectations you put on yourself, can lead you to not reach out for help in the very beginning when you need it, and to think, I can handle this. I'm a problem solver. I'm tough. I can get through this. So that's like in the beginning, like the mistake number one. You think, I can handle this. And besides, like one respondent told me, I'm not a pussy. I don't need counseling. It's like, okay. Okay, I got work to do here. I get it though. I totally get it. I would probably feel the same way. But it's not just weak people who need counseling. In fact, like I said earlier, the more determined you are to be a good responder, the more likely you are to be hypervigilant, the more likely you are to have high expectations on yourself, more likely you are to hide the fact that you're hurting and feel shameful that you need help. So you're not going to reach out, and maybe by now, if you're drinking, maybe your relationship with your spouse isn't that healthy anyway, so your spouse may not be a great support for you at this time. But that's, again, the great thing about seeing a counselor, because none of that matters. You come in, it's confidential. I don't know you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to walk with you in this journey to discover what's going on. Where is the pain coming from? How long have you had it? How is it affecting you? How have you been dragging it with you through your present life? And how can we help you not to continue dragging it into your future life? So I think if I were to sum it up, I guess I would just say, I thank you all for sacrificing so much for people like me who have gone years without even knowing how much you've done for us, without knowing and therefore appreciating all that you've given for us. And maybe you don't even know how much you've given up until you come for counseling and we really start looking at it. Because you devote everything to your career and you want to be a good responder. And unfortunately, it's all give on your part. I don't see a lot coming back to you in terms of having available psychological support, having adequate pay rates, having adequate supplies, I mean, I won't get into it, but it seems like you could be treated better as responders. So I want you to know that I'm going to keep fighting for you. And I don't want, just like you don't want anybody else to die or get hurt when you're on duty because you're there to save them. That's how I feel about you. And I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to die because of all of your years of helping me. So I hope you will take this to heart. And if you feel like you're needing to escape from something, or you need help coping with something going on, please don't feel ashamed or afraid to reach out. Just like you wouldn't want someone to be afraid to call 911 if they needed you. It's so predictable and preventable. It's just a shame that responders are, getting hurt and dying of suicide and drinking. So that's the biggest challenge, I think, is just getting you, the responders, to realize you are valued human beings even without your role as a responder. Even if you had never gone to the academy, you have value as a human being. And you deserve to have a quality of life. You deserve to be supported. You deserve to get help when you need it. You deserve to live a happy, healthy life filled with all kinds of good experiences and relationships and self-care, all that. And I'm going to keep pushing for that for you. So if you guys want to continue this conversation, I'll leave the comments section open. I would love to hear what you have to say. I have a feeling we're going to be revisiting this subject again. We're just going to keep talking about it until we get the awareness out there. I don't know what else to say. So, thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to try to do a video every week, so that way you know when I've posted a new one. And again, I would love to hear your comments so we can really dig into these subjects and hear what everybody has to say, what their concerns are, how they feel about stuff, and then we can talk about it more in the podcast. So anyway, that's about it for this episode. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you on my next podcast. Bye-bye.